Before we begin, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who believes in love beyond sight, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel for more romantic vampire stories with a haunting twist. The village of Dreven lived in shadows, not the kind cast by trees or buildings, but shadows of fear, of memory, of ancient pacts whispered between generations. Perched at the edge of the Thornvale Mountains, it was a place where candles burned longer than prayers, and silence weighed heavier than words. Every decade, on the eve of the blood moon, the villagers would send one of their own up the stone path to the Black Castle, a tribute, a sacrifice, a promise kept. No one returned. This year the name drawn was Liora, a girl with eyes as pale as moonlight and skin touched by the cold of night. Blind from birth, she had lived her life on the edge of awareness, never seeing but always sensing. She knew when storms approached before clouds gathered. She knew when people lied, even with kind voices, and she always knew who feared her and who pitied her. But Liora never asked for pity, only silence. When the name was spoken in the village square, no one dared look her way. Her father's hands trembled, and her mother sobbed quietly. But Liora only nodded once. "It's all right," she whispered. She was not afraid. The people believed it was because she didn't understand. But they were wrong. She understood more than any of them. On the day of the offering, they dressed her in white, the color of peace, of surrender. She tied her long dark hair back with a silver ribbon and placed her hand gently on the arm of the escort, an elder from the village, who could barely meet her blank, calm gaze. As they ascended the winding path, birds fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, and though she couldn't see the castle ahead, Liora felt it, like a pulse in the stone, like breath in the air, something ancient, something lonely. When they reached the great black gate, the elder hesitated. Do you want to pray?" he asked, voice hollow. "No," Liora said. "I want to go in." He stared at her, as if she were mad. But she only smiled, the kind of smile that belongs to someone who had already made peace with the inevitable. The gates opened on their own. The elder stepped back, and Liora walked inside. Alone. The castle was colder than the night. Its walls groaned with memories. The air smelled of stone, dust, and roses that had not bloomed in 100 years. Liora walked carefully but with no fear. She traced her steps with her senses, the faint echo of her heels, the scent of damp in the air, the cool brush of wind against her face as she moved down long, hollow halls. Then she stopped, because she was not alone. "I expected someone afraid," a voice said. It was low and rich like velvet torn from shadow, a voice that had not spoken in years and yet remembered every word. "I am not," Liora said. "Why?" "Because I have never seen anything, and people only fear what they see." A pause. "Interesting." Footsteps approached, silent to most, but not to her. She could feel the presence, massive, ancient, restrained like a beast held by silk threads. "Do you know what I am?" the voice asked. Liora tilted her head. "I don't need to." He came closer. "Your heart should race. Your breath should catch. I could kill you in the time it takes you to blink." She smiled. "I don't blink." The silence that followed was not cold. It was curious. She reached out with one hand, slowly, palms open. "I can't see you, but I can feel you." A hand took hers, strong, cold, precise. She inhaled sharply, not from fear, but from what she felt. Pain, deep-buried sorrow, guilt, a loneliness that stretched across lifetimes, and something else, something trembling beneath it. Hope. "You're not what I expected either," she said softly. He released her hand as if burned. "What do you see?" he asked sharply. "Not your face, but your grief." He said nothing. "You've lost something," she continued. "Someone. still silence. And you've hated yourself ever since. She turned her face toward where she felt him standing. But you're tired of hating, aren't you? The vampire, Lord Kael of the Black Castle, stared at her, though she would never know it. For centuries he had devoured those sent to him, not with cruelty, but with numb obedience to the pact. He was judge, warden, executioner. He had forgotten what it was like to feel. Until now. Until this girl who saw with no eyes, and spoke like a mirror to his soul. I will not kill you tonight, Kael said. Liora nodded. I knew you wouldn't. Why? Because someone like you, she said, turning her face toward the faint scent of roses in the hall, only kills to silence pain, but I am not silent. I speak it with you. He took a step back. I don't need a companion. No, she whispered. You need forgiveness. She heard him exhale, not breath, but something older. And then he vanished, a rush of wind and shadow. Liora stood alone again, but not abandoned, because she had touched something no one ever had, and in the darkness her own heart stirred, not from duty, not from sacrifice, but from the strange, terrifying sensation that her fate was only just beginning. Kael watched her from the shadows. He had seen many sacrifices walk through the castle doors. Some screamed, others fainted. All had died, quickly, cleanly forgotten by sunrise. But this girl, this blind, unshaken, quietly curious girl had unsettled him. Liora. She didn't flinch at his presence. She didn't cower when he approached. She didn't even ask for mercy. Instead, she reached for his hand, and in one brief, devastating moment, saw more of him than anyone in his immortal existence. That terrified him. Liora slept in a chamber once reserved for human nobility, untouched in centuries. Though she couldn't see the thick velvet drapes or the carvings on the ceiling, she sensed the age of the room, felt it in the way the wood creaked beneath her feet, the weight of silence pressing on the walls. And still, she wasn't afraid. In her dreams, she saw no monsters, only shadows trying to remember how to be men. The next evening, Kael appeared at her door without sound. She knew he was there before he spoke. I've prepared food, he said. I can't eat alone, she replied gently. There was a pause, a long one. Then, very well. They sat at a long table. Liora ate slowly, sensing him watch her from across the dark wooden surface. She didn't ask why he didn't eat. She knew. What were you before this? She asked quietly. Kael's voice was slow. A soldier, a scholar, a brother. None of it matters now. Then why do you remember it? He didn't answer. She continued. People forget pain, but they never forget who they were during it. Kael's eyes narrowed. Why are you really here? He asked. Liora set her fork down. Because your people are afraid of you, and afraid of what they've forgotten. Which is? That pain can be shared. She reached out again, fingers brushing the edge of the table. He hesitated, then gave her his hand. This time she didn't flinch at the cold. I see things, she whispered. Not faces, not colors, but the echoes left behind. Kael's voice dropped. What do you see now? Her lips trembled. A red field, a fire, a promise broken, and a name spoken in mourning. He jerked his hand away. That's enough. She didn't push further. Instead, she rose slowly from her seat. Thank you for dinner, she said, as if they were old friends parting. Kael watched her walk away, her steps calm, measured, light as snow. He clenched his fists. She saw too much. And yet, he couldn't send her away. Not now. Not when the sound of her voice made the stones of the castle feel less cold. In her chamber, Liora sat by the window, the wind brushing against her cheeks like a gentle warning. I touched something in him, she whispered to no one. And in the shadows, something touched her too. A memory not her own. A name buried deep. A life, once lost. And a feeling that what drew her to the castle was not chance, but something long sewn into the thread of her fate. The castle never slept. Even in the stillest hours of the night it breathed. Through its stone bones, through whispering corridors and trembling shadows, it remembered. And now, it remembered her. Liora. She did not belong to the castle, and yet she did. The moment she stepped inside, something ancient stirred. The very walls bent toward her footsteps. The wind paused to listen, and deep within the vampire who had lived lifetimes in silence, a heart long thought dead, began to ache. Kael did not knock when he entered. Liora was already standing near the fire, her fingers tracing the iron edge of the hearth. "I heard you," she said softly, "before you stepped into the hall." "You shouldn't hear me," he said. She turned toward his voice. "I hear everything that matters." He stepped closer, uncertain. "I killed dozens," he confessed. "Centuries ago, some were guilty, others were not. I fed without care, I ruled with fear, and every time I spoke the name of a soul I consumed, I felt less human." "And now?" Kael's voice was low. "Now I'm afraid to say your name." "Why?" "Because you make me feel like a man again." Liora reached for him, and this time he didn't resist. Her hands brushed his chest, resting over the place where his heart had once beat. It was still, but something moved beneath it, something deeper than blood. "You're not who you were," she whispered. "Not anymore. But I still carry him inside me." "We all carry ghosts," she said. "The difference is you want to be free of yours." Kael's hand rose, trembling, and he cupped her cheek. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, without ceremony or expectation, she leaned into his touch, and the world shifted, not with magic but with truth. That night they didn't kiss, they didn't speak of love, but something passed between them, a vow without words, a bond not of blood, but of recognition. And somewhere in the heart of the castle, where no fire had burned in 100 years, a candle flickered to life. The moon rose full and red above the black castle, a signal in the sky that once meant death for the village below. But this night, the air held something different. Not dread, but decision. Kael had not fed in weeks. He had avoided the thirst, pushed it down, resisted the pull that had driven him for centuries. But now it clawed at him, a beast begging to be unleashed. And yet, even in this state, when hunger threatened to consume him, he would not touch her. Liora, not even with a whisper of fangs. She knew. Even without eyes, she felt the way his body tensed when she drew near, the way his breath grew shallow, and his steps turned hesitant. "You're starving," she said. "I won't hurt you. You won't have to." He turned away, voice low. "I won't feed on you, Liora, even if you offered." She crossed the room, her hand reaching for him in the dark. "I'm not offering blood," she said. "I'm offering trust." That night they stood beneath the high tower where the moonlight poured through broken stone like silver rain. Liora extended her wrist. Kael flinched. "I can't." "You can," she said, "because you won't lose yourself. Not with me." He stepped forward slowly, reverently, and pressed his lips to her wrist, not to bite, but to tremble, to weep, to accept. No blood was drawn, but something was exchanged, a bond older than instinct, a hunger deeper than flesh, a vow of restraint, of reverence, of something unspoken yet unstoppable. Afterward, Kael carried her back to her chamber, not because she needed it, but because he did. And as she drifted into sleep, her head against his chest, he whispered her name, not as a predator, not as a lord, but as a man in love with the only soul that ever truly saw him. The days that followed were quiet, too quiet. Something had changed within the castle, not just in Kael or Liora, but in the air itself. The silence that once protected the halls now pulsed with anticipation, as if the walls themselves awaited a reckoning long delayed. It began with a whisper. Liora heard it first as she passed through a corridor she'd never entered before. Her fingertips brushed the stone, and the stone answered. "Come back." She paused, heart fluttering, not from fear, from recognition. This was not the voice of a stranger. It was her own. She followed it, room after room, past the great hall, down into the lowest chambers, where no torch burned and no window allowed light. She did not stumble. The way called to her, like memory buried beneath the surface of skin. When Kael found her, she stood before a sealed archway, hands on ancient carvings. "What is this place?" she asked. His eyes darkened. "This is where I buried the truth." Centuries ago, in this hidden tomb, Kael had sealed away a relic, a stone laced with old blood, cursed by those who made him. It was said that whoever touched it could relive their soul's origin, and see the moment it splintered. He had never dared, but Liora, blind but not broken, reached out without hesitation. The moment her fingers brushed the stone, light exploded behind her eyes. Visions, a battlefield drenched in crimson, a man kneeling over a woman with dark hair and pale skin, a promise shattered, a soul split in two, one half damned to hunger and the other reborn blind to see. When she gasped and collapsed, Kael caught her. "Liora." She opened her eyes, unseeing as ever, but now filled with knowing. "I remember," she whispered. "I remember you." They had known each other before in another life. She had loved him and died by his hand, not from cruelty, but from his failure to protect her. "I didn't recognize you," he said, voice shaking, "but my soul did, and mine forgave you long before it remembered." In that moment, Kael fell to his knees, not out of weakness, out of reverence, because for the first time in all his eternal nights, he wasn't alone, and the woman he had once lost had found him again, not through vision, but through love. The stone chamber remained silent after the vision passed. Kael carried Liora gently back to the tower room, where moonlight streamed across the stone floor like threads of silver. He watched her breathe, steady and calm, her hands resting against her chest, hands that had once been stained by his mistakes. In another life, he had killed her once. And yet, here she was, alive, whole, unafraid. When she awoke, she did not speak right away. Instead, she reached out, and he took her hand without question. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked. She nodded. "I saw everything. I tried to forget that life," he said softly. "I thought burying it would mean I'd never have to feel the shame again." Liora tilted her face toward him. "You didn't need to forget. You needed someone to remember it with you." He knelt before her, eyes fixed on the floor. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Not after what I did. Not after what I failed to do." "You didn't fail me, Kael." He looked up, startled by the use of his name. She continued, her voice soft but certain. "You failed yourself, but this time, you didn't run. You stayed. You let yourself feel. You let me in." She pulled him closer until their foreheads touched. "I loved you once," she said, "and now I choose to love you again. Not because of who you were, but because of who you're becoming." He trembled, not from hunger, from hope. Outside, the blood moon rose again, the same moon under which she had been offered as a sacrifice. But now she was no offering. She was a choice, a miracle, a light inside the darkness. That night, they shared their first true kiss. Not a kiss of guilt, not of apology, but of rebirth. A union not forged by blood, but by the souls they carried across lifetimes. The blood moon waned. Its crimson glow faded from the sky as the first light of dawn stretched across the Thornvale Mountains. For centuries, the sun had never touched the castle's walls. But that morning, it did. Kael stood in the great hall, light brushing his skin like a lover's breath. He did not burn. He did not vanish. Instead, he closed his eyes and let it warm the cold that had lived within him for centuries. Behind him, Liora approached, barefoot on the stone. "You're not afraid?" she asked. "No," he whispered. "Not anymore." They walked through the castle together, no longer predator and prey, no longer cursed and sacrifice, but soul and soul, drawn together across lifetimes, through darkness, through grief, through silence. In the garden, where dead roses once hung like ghosts, new buds bloomed. Flowers that had not opened in 100 years now lifted their heads toward the sun, because she had brought light, not to the castle, but to him. The villagers of Dreven waited, expecting another lost tribute, another name mourned in quiet. But when Liora returned, hand in hand with Kael, they did not run. They bowed, because for the first time, the one sent as a sacrifice had returned transformed, not by blood, but by love. They never feared the vampire again, and the castle no longer stood as a tomb. It became a haven, a sanctuary for those lost in shadow, drawn to the woman who saw without sight, who healed with touch, with words, with presence, and at her side, the Lord who had once lived in silence, now laughed. They never married, not formally. Their bond required no vows, no priest, only a garden blooming where death once reigned, and the quiet knowing that two souls once shattered had found each other again. Love does not need eyes to see. It needs truth. It needs memory. And above all, it needs the courage to reach for the darkness and bring light. If this story moved your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in fate and love beyond sight, comment your favorite moment, and subscribe to our channel for more romantic vampire stories that touch the soul.